Hello, hello, hello. Hope you all have a happy new year. Let's get started. Chapter 6 The World of the Play. Canute was right about one thing. News travels fast at comlink speed. Returning from Circuit Breaker Square to his quarters, Derek hadn't even gotten through the door before Mandelbrot began talking. "Master, where have you been? I have been besieged by requests to assist you in your latest project. I fear that, lacking sufficient information, I was forced to tell everyone to wait. I hope that was all right." "It was," said Derek, lying down on the couch. "Where's Ariel?" "She went to her room. She mumbled something about mopping up on her Shakespeare." "I think you mean brushing up." "If you say so. You're not very comfortable with human idioms, are you, Mandelbrot?" "I can be neither comfortable nor uncomfortable conversing with them, but I take you to mean it is something difficult for me to translate the particular surface meanings in practical terms. For instance, how do you brush up someone who is ancient history? In that respect I do sometimes have problems communicating, but about this project—" "All right, I'll tell you. But wait, where's Woolruff?" "With Miss Ariel. I believe Woolruff is performing some task. Forgive me if I am misphrasing it again, but she is being Miss Ariel's line coach." "Sh! Quiet! Listen!" And Derek heard, very softly through the closed door, Ariel speaking the words: "Oh, what a noble mind is here overthrown! The courtier, soldier, scholar's eye, tongue, sword, the expectancy and rose of the fair state, the glass of fashion and the mould of form, the observed of all observers is Cubit," said Woolruff in a low volume that wasn't hushed enough to be called a whisper, but was probably as close as one as she could manage. "Quite down," Ariel finished enthusiastically. "It seems my second bit of casting is almost complete," said Derek. "Casting, master?" said Mandelbrot. "You are having a cast made? Have you injured yourself?" "No, not at all," Derek replied, laughing. "I must say it seems you were hiding your suffering awfully well. It's my hobby. Listen, tell me what you would do with the robot that dismantled Lucius." The sudden shock of the image of the robot lying there, behind the closed door to his office, sent a tremor of loss and grief through Derek's veins. And of terror, too. He'd never before thought robots were things that could die. He always assumed they were immortal in a way that life could never be. "Forgive me, master, but I would think nothing of it. I would merely follow your instructions." "And what if I wasn't around to give you instructions? What if you had to decide when you were on your own?" "First I would solicit the robot's explanation, and learn of any justification for its actions, if any, it may have had, particularly as they involve its interpretation of the third laws." "But there is no law against a robot harming another robot." "Of course, and the robot in question may have been operating on instructions from a human, but I gather such is not the case here." "Well, yes. So after having received the explanation I would take the safest course and have the robot closed down until the proper repairs could be administered, or until instructions could be received from human sources." "That could take a long time, particularly here on Robot City." "No harm would be done. Upon reactivation, if that is what is decided upon, the robot would behave as if it had been shut down for a tune-up the day before." "But what if there was something you needed from the robot?" "Then that would depend on what you needed, and how badly you needed it." "I'm glad you feel that way. Not that you can feel, I know, but it helps make me feel better that you know your logic circuits concur with some of this." And he explained to Mandelbrot his theory that a creative robot with a scientific bent might be able to make a diagnostic breakthrough to help Ariel. "But how do you know that Canute possesses scientific talents?" "I don't, but I may be able to use its mind to help me learn more about what's happening to the robots in this place. And I need to do it, to get Canute to admit its error without drifting out in the process. That's one reason why I'm putting on this play." "This play?" "Hamlet, by William Shakespeare. Quiet. Listen." Ariel's voice came through the door, muffled but quite clear as she repeated and then continued the speech she'd rehearsed earlier, this time in louder, more confident cadences. And I, of ladies most dejected and wretched, that sucked the honey of his music boughs, now see that noble and most sovereign reason, like sweet bells jangled out of tune and harsh. Isn't that beautiful?" Derrick guessed. "The words, master, are Miss Ariel saying them. Have you been talking to Harry? Master, I do not understand your implication. Never mind. Anyway, I'm going to use this play as a lightning rod to draw every robot with creative tendencies to the same place, working on a group project, and then see what develops. I don't know what's going on here, but whatever it is, I'm going to bust it wide open." Someone knocked on the door. "Get that, will you?" Derrick asked as he turned toward Ariel's office. "Ariel, this is your director speaking. Come out here, will you?" Ariel came out in a flash, followed by a bounding Woolruff. "Director?" she said. "Then who's going to be my leading man?" "Oh, when you found out this production, how did you know you were going to be Ophelia?" "Because I clearly possess all the mental and physical qualifications. Who better to play a girl who's going insane than one who really is? Of course, I don't know who's going to play Hamlet's mother, but that's not my problem, is it?" "At least she's keeping her sense of humor about things," Derrick thought. "No, it's your director's and your leading man's." Ariel grinned and bowed. "At your service, Mr. Director." "Master?" "Yes, Mandelbrot." "Forgive the intrusion, Master Derrick and Mistress Ariel, but Harry Benny and M334 are at the door. They said they had vibes to present to you." "Vibes?" said Woolruff. "Not a nice word on my world." "Yes, but who knows what it means here?" said Ariel. "Send them in, Mandelbrot." "Yes, I suppose we have to begin interviewing for our cast and crew sooner than later," said Derrick. In walked the three robots, each carrying brass objects. Each object struck Derrick as being rather strange. M334 held a tube with 24 keys and with what appeared to be a mouthpiece on one end. It was evidently a wind instrument, though what sort of sound it was supposed to make Derrick had no way of imagining. Nor did he know what sorts of sounds he might expect from the other two instruments held by the other two robots. Benny's was smaller than M334's and could be easily held in one hand. There were 3 taps on the top, presumably to modulate the sonic textures. Harry's was the straightest and longest of the 3. It had a sliding device that evidently would lengthen or shorten the tubing to match the player's will, again presumably to modulate the sound. "Good day, sir," said Benny. "We can only presume we are interrupting your preparations." "Good grief, word travels fast around here," Ariel exclaimed. "You found out, didn't you?" said Derrick. Ariel shrugged. "I heard of it from Woolruff." "And how did you hear about it, Woolruff?" Derrick asked. Woolruff merely shrugged. The effort made her entire body quiver. "And so we thought you might want to see for yourself the results of the project we've been devoting ourselves to instead of closing down in our spare time," finished Benny, as if no one else had spoken. "Ah, and what is the nature of this project?" Derrick asked suspiciously. "Originally it was purely music," said Benny, "but when we heard you were planning to engage us in a recreation of human art forms, we performed research and discovered that music was often a significant part of such functions," said Harry. "That struck us as being particularly fortuitous," said M334. "We thought, perhaps presumably, but how could we tell if we refrained from inquiring, that our music might make a significant contribution to the enterprise." What kind of music are we attempting with those things?" Ariel asked. "Auroran nouveau fugues? Tentorian ecto variations?" "Something to close Terran style," said Harry. "You mean from Earth?" Ariel asked incredulously. Terran culture was not held in high regard in most baser circles. "Shakespeare was from Earth," put in Derrick mildly. "Yes, but he was lucky enough to be talented," said Ariel. "You can't say that about most Terran artists." "Perhaps you judge our aspirations too harshly," said Benny. "Yes, you should judge after you hear us play," said M334. "Yes, you should have plenty of critical ammunition then," said Harry. Ariel stared at Derrick. "It was a joke," Derrick said. "Close to being a good one," said Woolruff. The 3 robots then magnetically applied computerized, flexible, artificial lips to their speaker grills. The lips were connected by electrical cords that led into the posteronic cavities, and Derek saw at once, by the way the robots exercised the lips and blew air through them, that they responded directly to thought control. Just like real lips, thought Derek, biting his lower one as if to make sure. Excuse me, but before you boys strike up the brass, I'd like to know what names those instruments are supposed to have. This is a trumpet, said Benny. A saxophone, said M334, and a trombone, said Harry. And by way of further introduction, said Benny, the number we would like to assault for your oral perusal is an ancient composition dating not 400 years later than Shakespeare's time. This was already during the age of recorded music, but no tapes were currently available through Central, so we can only surmise the manner in which these instruments were played by examining the sheet music. What there is of it, said Harry. Most of this number is improvised. Uh-oh, said Ariel to herself, putting her hand protectively on her forehead. I must be having delirium. And the number we would like to assault is what the reference tape denote as, in the parlance of the day, a sappy little ditty. This composer, the human known as Duke Ellington, called Bouncing Buoyancy. I've got a bad feeling about this, Derek thought. He waved his hand. Play on, Macduffs! The robots did. At least, that's what the human and alien thought they were trying to do. The musical form was so radically unlike anything they'd experienced, the playing so haphazard and odd, so full of accidental spurts and sputters and stops, that exactly what the robots were attempting to do remained a matter of some conjecture. Benny's trumpet played the lead of a blaring succession of notes that occasionally struck the ear as being just right. The noise the instrument made resembled the wail of a siren recorded backwards. So high was its frequency that Derek became afraid his ears would begin bleeding. Benny's notes, on the other hand, did seem to possess some kind of internal logic, as if he knew where he was going, but wasn't quite sure how to get there. Harry on the trombone and M334 on the saxophone attempted to provide Benny with a solid foundation. Awkwardly, they tutored 8 measures of unchanging harmony over and over again. They nearly succeeded, harmony-wise, and perhaps their glitches would have been so noticeable if they'd occasionally managed to start and end the 8 measures at the same time. The trombone itself tended to sound like an exquisitely crafted raspberry, severely brayed from the mouth of a contemptuous donkey. The saxophone's sonic attack, meanwhile, resembled nothing so much as a gaggle of geese gurgling under water. The effect of the 3 instruments combined was such that Derek wondered momentarily if the robot hadn't come up with a violation of interplanetary weapons treaty. Derek spent the first minute finding the music absolutely atrocious, utterly without any redeeming social value. It was the worst kind of noise, that is, noise pretending to be something else. But gradually he began to perceive, vaguely, the equally vague ideal in the robots' minds. The music itself, regardless of the manner of its playing, possessed a single-minded joy that quickly became infectious. Derek discovered that his toe was tapping in rhythm akin to that of music. Ariel was nodding thoughtfully. Woolworth had her head cocked inquisitively, and Mandelbrot was his usual inscrutable self. Derek's mind wandered a second, and he wondered if he could rig up a specimen of those lip-like fixtures on the mouths to help robots portray human emotions during the production. The fact that most had immobile faces, incapable of even rudimentary expression, was going to cripple the illusion unless he devised some way to use the very inflexibility to greater effect. He imagined a set of lips twisted in laughter at the play's cavorting actors, and in fear of the ghost of Hamlet's father, and in anguish at the sight of all the dead bodies littering the stage. Well, it's a thought, he figured, and then returned his attention to the music. The arrangement of Bouncing Buoyancy concluded with all 3 instruments playing the main theme simultaneously, theoretically. The robots took the mouthpieces from their lips with a flourish and held out the instruments toward their audience. Derek and Ariel looked at one another. Her expression read, "You're the director, you do the talking." "How did our number bludgeon you, master?" asked Benny. It was certainly unusual." I think what you robots are trying to get at, and I think I may like it if you actually get there. Don't you agree, Ariel? Oh, yes, definitely. She was really saying, I seriously doubt it. Is it Amlit? Woolruff asked. That I don't know, said Derek. I suppose this Ellington fellow composed a few other works, though. In a variation of styles and moods, said Bunny. All adaptable to our instruments, said Harry. I was afraid of that, Derek said. But don't worry, I'm sure you'll improve with practice. I take it this has been your secret project, Benny? Benny bowed in a manner curiously appreciative for a robot. I personally crafted the instruments and taught my friends what knowledge I had concerning the art of blowing horns. Take those lips off, will you? They're just too weird. As the robots complied, Mandelbrot said, Master, this performance, where will it take place? I do not believe the city has theatrical facilities. Don't worry, I've gotten it taken care of. I know just the robot who can design us a theater perfectly suited for denizens of Robot City. Only, he doesn't know about it yet. And who is that, Master? Canate. Who else? Derek smiled. In fact, get me Canate. Have him come here right away. I want him to hear some of this bouncing buoyancy brew. Each age... Each age has different terrors and tensions, said Derek, a few days later on the stage of the New Globe, but they all open on the same abyss. He paused to see what effect his words had on the robots sitting in the chairs before the proscenium. He had thought his words exceedingly profound, but the robots merely stared back at him as though he had recounted the symbols of a meaningless equation, interesting only because a human had happened to say it. He cleared his throat. Sitting in seats off to the side of the robots were Ariel and Mandelbrot. Ariel had a notebook in hand, but Mandelbrot, whom Derek had appointed property master, naturally had no need of one. His total recall would keep track of the production's prop specifications without notes. Woolruff sat licking her paw in a chair just behind the pair. She'd insisted on being the official prompter or line coach, and as such had already spent a lot of time prompting Derek and Ariel while they were memorizing their lines, a task that he feared, in his own case, was far from completed. Derek cleared his throat again. His awkwardness showed, at least if the knowing smile Ariel directed toward him was any indication. Woolruff just licked her chops. He got the feeling that on an unspoken level she was finding the shenanigans of humans and robots incredibly amusing. You're all familiar with the studies some of you have been making concerning the laws of humanics. That means you're also familiar, at least in passing, with the many peculiarities and contradictions of the human condition. Passion and madness, obsession and nihilism, these things don't exist among you robots, but it's something we humans have to deal with, in varying degrees, every day. Shortly we shall boldly go where no robot has gone before. We shall descend into the dense, dark, deep, decrepit abyss of the thirst for revenge, and when we emerge we'll have something really terrific to remember in the days ahead. It'll be swell, you'll see. "Get on with it!" Ariel shouted. "Forgive me, master, but it is my considered opinion that you should get on to the more theatrical matters," piped in Mandelbrot. In an effort to appear natural he had crossed his legs and held his palms on his knee. He succeeded only in appearing like a bunch of plywood pounded together with rusty nails. "It's all right, Mandelbrot," said Derek, feeling his face flush. "I'm just getting warmed up." Returning his attention to the robots, he could not fail to notice that their posture was every bit as stiff as his Robot Fridays. For a brief instant he wondered, "What in the world am I doing here?" Steeled himself, and promptly got on with it. "Theater is an art that depends on the work of many collaborators," he began. Here was the New Globe Theater, designed by the robot Canute and built under its personal supervision. By following the leads of clues in the central computer that Lucius had left when it had used its programs, Canute was able to tell the city what to build and how long it should stand. Meaning that Canute had done pretty much what Lucius had done, but acting under orders from a human. While supervising this aspect of his project, Derek realized it was possible that Lucius had in turn followed leads suggested by Derek's establishment of automats in one building out of every 10, but of course Derek could never know for certain. Perhaps the task has been easier, less taxing for Canate because, unlike Lucius, he had a pattern to follow, that of the old Globe Theatre in the London earth of Shakespeare's day. But he had added his own specifications without Derek's prompting. He had attempted to ascertain the specific problems of form and function, and how they either augmented or conflicted with his sense of how a theatre should fit in aesthetically with the environment of Robot City. Derek had pointedly refrained from telling Canate why the Ebony, of all the robots in the city, had been appointed to design the second permanent building of the Robot City. And he had watched Canate carefully while giving instructions, to see if it was in danger of post-ironic drift for doing, Derek suspected, exactly what it had harmed another robot for doing. But Canate had given no such evidence. All that was needed to satisfy it, apparently, was for the impetus to come from human instructions. Like the old globe, Canate's theatre was roughly cylindrical in shape, but it was also misshapen and bent, like a spherical in shape, like a bar of metal that had been slightly melted on the ground, then twisted beneath a giant foot. Like the old globe, or at least according to most of the conjectures that had been made about it after it had been torn down to make room for a row of tenements a few decades after Shakespeare's death, there were 3 trap doors in the stage, leading to different areas backstage. One backstage passage led as well to the city's underground conduits, in case there was a power problem. There were both a gallery and an upper gallery above the stage, and several hidden cameras in the wings. The rows of seats were staggered to provide each patron with an unobstructed view of the proceedings. Continuing the effort of providing the audience with the least possible lines of sight, the floor was raised and leveled in a series of gradual steps. And, in the tradition of modern concert venues, tremendous screens for close-up shots were hung above the stage. Microphones were concealed throughout the stage and galleries. Even the size of the theatre was impressive. The angles of the design provided for a variety of possible dramatic effects. But it was Canate's choice of colors that really made the new globe something to shout about all over the hyperwave. On the jet-black ceiling, sparkles wavered in and out of focus, like stars seen through a haze of heat. The carpet and seats were in gray-brown tones, variations of the colors found in the conduits and on the surface of the city. Canate's version of earth tones. The curtain was a flaming crimson that sparkled too, and the walls were a soft demure shade of white. The soft currents of the air conditioner system continuously rippled the curtains. Robots naturally had no need of air conditioning, giving Derek the impression that Canate had designed the theatre not only for robots, but for humans as well. As if the Ebony had designed the theatre in secrets, perhaps unrecognized. Hope that one day a play for an audience of humans would be presented here. The subconscious hope? As robots, you are constitutionally incapable of telling a lie, Derek said to his unresponsive audience. Only human beings can do that, although not always successfully. Theatre, however, is a world of pretense, provoking the collaborative activity of the spectator's imagination. The spectator must be ready, willing, and able to believe in the lie of fiction, in the hopes of finding amusement, and perhaps some enlightenment. Our job is to assist him, make him want to believe the lie. On the Shakespearean stage, little was shown, but everything was signified. Speech, action, prop, setting, all worked together toward the common end of providing the viewer a window through which he could look on the world. And if all the efforts of the cast and crew were successful, then the viewer, knowing that what he was seeing was a fabrication, willingly suspended his disbelief, choosing to believe for the moment that what he was seeing was real for the purpose of relating to the story. Our challenge is different. We must age, force, and agitate robots to exercise their logic integrals in such a way that the integrals, too, become suspended. We must not only provide a window to the world, but to the heart of man. As I understand it, there are three worlds which must be considered for every production. That's the world of the play, the world of the playwright, and the world of the production. I think we can all agree on what the world of the production is. I'd like to say a few words about the other two worlds. "Are you going to perform this play or talk it to death?" Ariel called out mischievously. Derek laughed nervously. She had thrown him off his rhythm, and he'd forgotten what he planned to say next. "The world of the playwright," Mandelbrot prompted helpfully. "Okay. In our time, man has achieved, more or less, an utterly civilized life. Few men ever break the laws of man. Most people live long, healthy lives, even on overpopulated Earth where conditions aren't too terrific. But in Shakespeare's day, life was often less a gift to be savored than it was a bagatelle to be endured. Working conditions were brutal and difficult. Education was non-existent except for the privileged classes, and the scientific way of thinking, based on logical thinking with empirical proof backing it up, was only beginning its ascendancy. Most people died before they were 35, thanks to war, pestilence, persecution, lousy hygiene, things of that nature. After all, Queen Elizabeth I of England, the ruler of Shakespeare's day, was considered odd because she took a bath once a month, whether she needed it or not. But yes, what is it?" Derek asked, noting that a robot sitting near Canute in the front had tentatively raised its hand. "Most humble, abject, pietist apologies tendered for this untimely interruption," said the robot. "But after having read the text and pondered its meaning for several hours, I find myself unhappily fixated on the problem of overwhelming significance, and it's reasonably for me to trust that only a human being can explain it adequately. Of course, I welcome any question." "Even one of subjective nature?" "Naturally. Even one that may in some quarters be considered too impolite for normal societal intercourse?" "Of course. Shakespeare was a missionary in opening up the realms of terror and discussion for centuries." "Even if the question is personal?" Without trying to be obvious about it, Derek glanced down at his crotch to see if his zipper was up. "Why, sure. We're going to have some pretty complex motivation and basic human drives to examine here." "Even if the question may be extremely personal?" "What? Is that a direct order?" "No, it's a direct question, but you can take it as an order, even if only it will get you to come out with it." "Excellent. For a moment I was afraid my capacitors would not permit me utterance if I was not buoyed by the added impetus of a direct order." "Would you please tell me what's on your mind?" "I know that the human male and female tend to have different surface contours, and that this difference has something to do with their frequent complex social interaction. And so my question is simply this: just what is it that the human male and female seem to be doing to each other in all their spare time?" A stony silence echoed throughout the theater. Derek's focus wavered, and the gentle hum of the air conditioning went through a progression of hypnotic wah-wahs, as if it had been filtered in a recording studio. He shot Ariel a questioning glance. She smiled and shrugged. He looked at Woolruff. She shook her head. "Don't look at me. We have no mating customs. Just do it and be done." "I seriously doubt it," Derek snapped back. He happened to glance stage left just as Harry, holding the trombone, stuck its head from the wings. Benny and M334, also holding their instruments, stood behind Harry and gestured as if to grab the robot by the shoulders and pull it back. They evidently thought better of it, though, and permitted Harry to say, "Mr. Director, I believe we can shake some illumination on the situation." Derek bowed and gestured him onto the stage. "Be my guest." But as Harry quickly walked out and stood before the audience of robots, Derek suddenly got a sinking sensation in his stomach. Harry, this isn't another one of your jokes, is it?" "I believe it shall prove instructive." "All right, I know when I'm beat." Derek moved away to stand between Ariel and Woolruff. Harry did not even look at the humans before commencing. He concentrated his gaze on the robots. "An axiom of carbon-based life forms is that nature has intended them to reproduce. Not necessarily on schedule, not necessarily when it's convenient, not necessarily prettily, but, well, If the life form in question derives a certain amount of gratification in the act of reproducing, that is well and good as far as the life form is concerned, but all nature cares about is the reproductive urge. Some visual data is available from Central, and I suggest you study it at your leisure so we can all understand what chemical reactions are driving Ophelia and Hamlet, while the latter is putting aside the pleasures of the moment to gain his crown. Harry nodded at Derek. "You see, I have read the play already." Then back to the audience. "And so that you might understand the dark innermost depths of the urge, I must direct your attention to the early days of mankind's colonization of the planets, in the days before he had truly accepted robots as his faithful companions, in the days when the wars of Earth, with their nuclear missiles and their space-based defense systems, had followed man to the stars. In those days military bases on newly colonized planets were common, and generally they were positioned at points remote from civilian installations. And in those days the sexes were often segregated, so it was not unusual for 100 or so men to find themselves alone in remote desolate lands, waiting for battles that never came, waiting for the day when they could once again delight in female companionship and discharge themselves of the urges building up during their isolation. Building, 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 ever building. So what did the men do about sex? They thought about it, they talked about it, and they dreamed about it. Some of them even did something about it. The exact nature of that something, as fate would have it, was the uppermost in the mind of one General Zell, for it was a problem that he, too, would encounter while serving out his new assignment as commander of Base Hoyle. The general was a meticulous person who liked everything shipshape, and so upon his arrival to this remote military installation he insisted the attaché take him on an immediate tour of the premises. The general was quite pleased with the barracks, the battlements, and the base as a whole, but he became quite distressed when he and the attaché turned up a corner and saw hitched up to the post the sorriest, most pathetic, swaying, fly-infested old mare in the history of mankind. "What is that?" the general asked. "That is a mare," said the attaché. "And why is it here? Why is it not stuffed and standing out in the field, scaring away the hawks and crows?" "Because the men need it, sir," said the attaché. "Need it? What could they possibly need it for?" "Well, as you know, sir, the nearest civilian settlement is over 100 kilometers away." "Yes." "And you know that for security reasons the only means of travel permitted for enlisted men between here and there is strictly bipedal." "Yes, but I fail to see what any of that has to do with that failed genetic experiment." "Well, then, surely you know that men must be men. They have needs, you know, needs that must be tended to." The general looked in horror at the mare. He could not believe what he was hearing. The information was grave, in danger of causing him severe psychological harm. "You mean the men, they, with that old mare?" The attaché nodded gravely. "Yes, the urge builds up, there's nothing else they can do." The general was on the verge of hyperventilating. He became so dizzy that he had to steady himself by leaning on the attaché. "On my honor as a soldier," said the general, "I will never become that desperate." But as his tour of duty wore on the urge built and built, until one day he had no choice but admit that he was exactly that desperate. Finally he could take it no more, and he said to the attaché, "Bring the mare to my quarters at once." "To your quarters?" the attaché asked, evidently a little confused over something. "Yes, to my quarters," said the general. "You remember what you said about the men and the mare?" "Yes, sir," said the attaché, saluting. The attaché did as he was told. By now the mare was, if anything, a mere shadow of her former decrepit self. Recently she had fallen off a cliff and had been lucky to survive with only mildly crippling injuries, and her body had been ravaged by disease. So the attaché was quite horrified, stunned to the core of his being, in fact, when the general took off his trousers and began to have his way with the pathetic beast. "Sir!" exclaimed the attaché, "what are you doing?" "Is it not obvious what I'm doing, sir?" said the general, "just as the men do." "Sir, I fail to grasp your meaning," said the attaché. "Never, never have I seen such a sight." "But you said the men, their urges, and the mare." "Sir, the men have their urges, it is true, but I meant that when the urge becomes too much for them, they climb on top of the mare and ride her to the nearest settlement." "There, does that make everything clear?" finished Harry. "What is he talking about?" mumbled Woolruff. "Now I'm totally confused," whispered Eric. "At least his narrative technique is improving." Ariel, meanwhile, couldn't stop laughing. "That is the silliest thing I've ever heard," she said between breaths. Derek Carey remained in place on the stage as he awaited his audience's verdict. The robots had greeted the end of the joke with a kind of stony silence that only metal could summon. To a one, they stared straight at Harry for several moments. Then the robot that had asked the question had prompted the joke, turned to his comrade on the right and said, "Yes, that makes sense." "I understand," said another. "As translucent as a gong," said the third. "Mysterious, absolutely mysterious," said Canate. The ebony was in the minority, however, as most of the robots seemed to be satisfied with Harry's explanation. Derek waited for Ariel to stop laughing and ask her, "Just what do you think is going on here?" She turned toward him, took him by the arm, and whispered in a conspiratorial tone, "The robots are beginning to learn about the world of man the way we do, through jokes." "That does not compute," replied Derek. Let me put it this way. When you're growing up in on Auroran schools, one of the great mysteries in life is what's commonly known as the birds and bees. Yes, I know that phrase, but I don't recall how I learned about it. That's because you have amnesia. Now listen. While we received a lot of classroom instruction in the scientific sense, we still had certain anxieties. You don't remember yours, but you've probably still got a lot. Not that I'm being personal or anything, it's just a fact. Thank you. Go on. And one of the ways we kids relieved ourselves of our anxieties, and found out a little bit about reality, was through the artistic vehicle known throughout the galaxy as the dirty joke. And that's what's going on here." Dirk couldn't explain why, but he felt his face turning red. "This is an outrage! Should I put a stop to it?" "Oh, you're such a prude. Of course not. This is all part of the learning experience. You know the old saying, 'Nobody approves of a dirty joke, except from someone who knows how to tell it.'" "Then why am I going through all this effort to put on this big production? Why don't I just ask you to strip for them?" "You'd like it, but they wouldn't care. They're not listening to these jokes for cheap thrills, but because they want to learn more about us." "They really do. They really want to understand what it means to be human, don't they?" "I think it's a lot different than that. Personally, though, I also think you should keep your mind on what's happening now, because Harry's launched into another joke." Sure enough, the robot had. "The last man on earth sat alone in a room," he was saying. Suddenly there was a knock on the door. "All right, you're a success, Harry." Waving his arms, Derek rushed up to him and put his hand over the speaker grill. A symbolic gesture, to be sure, but no less an effective one. "Just join your comrades backstage until I call for you, okay?" "Yes, Mr. Director," replied Harry, briskly walking away. Where were we? Oh, it doesn't matter. Let's talk about the play. "The play's the thing," Hamlet says, "wherein I'll catch the conscience of the king. Hamlet's uncle Claudius has murdered Hamlet's father, the King of Denmark, then taken his brother's place on the throne. To solidify his claim, Claudius has married Hamlet's mother, Gertrude. When Hamlet returns home from school, he has found the throne, which should be his, usurped, while he suspects his uncle of foul play. He has no proof but the word of a ghost from beyond the grave. To secure this proof, Hamlet hires a traveling troupe of actors to perform a play that mirrors the crime that he believes Claudius has committed. He hopes that by watching his uncle during the performance he'll see the guilt, the uncovered knowledge of the crime, written on his uncle's face. Claudius, meanwhile, suspects Hamlet of faking madness in search of this proof, and so he is stalking his uncle even as Hamlet is stalking him. This play is but the duel of wits between the two, and the means men will have to take what they want, be it a throne, revenge, or justice." Derek turned to Mandelbrot and nodded. Mandelbrot stood and said, "The Mr. Director wishes to thank you for volunteering and submitting to the interview process." Mandelbrot gestured toward Canute's way. "And for following orders. No doubt many orders will be curtly given you in the days to come, and Mr. Director wishes to thank you in advance. As most of you know, Mr. Director will assault the part of Hamlet, while Miss Ariel will impersonate the doomed lamented Ophelia. I will now communicate on comlink wavelengths of your assignments in the cast and crew categories." It took Mandelbrot only a few seconds to do so, since he could impart more information so much more quickly on the higher frequencies. Derek and Ariel heard nothing. They only knew the robots were hearing because they often nodded to indicate their understanding. "Okay, is everything understood?" Derek asked when Mandelbrot returned to his stiff sitting position. Kennedy raised a finger. "Master, may I confer with you in private for a moment?" "Sure," said Derek, walking stage right to the wings. "Come over here." Kennedy did and asked, "Master, am I to impart any significance to the fact that I have been assigned the role of Claudius?" "No. Should there be?" "It appears there should be. When you first spoke to me in the square, you asked questions of a nature I can only describe as suspicious. Soon afterward you assisted me, assigned me a task similar to the one Lucius took upon him itself, and now you assign me the role of a murderer, the object of the play within the play. Surely the logical mind must be able to infer something from all this." "Nah, not at all, Kennedy. It's coincidence, sheer coincidence." "May I inquire something further?" "By all means." "Why do you not ask me forthrightly if I am the one responsible for Lucius's demise? You know I cannot withhold the truth." "Kennedy, I'm surprised at you. I've got no interest in asking you. Now get along. The best part's coming up next." Derek pushed the ebony in the direction of the robots, then rubbed his hands together as if to warm them with the help of a nearby fire. The ebony had dared a great deal in asking Derek to confront it. If Derek had taken up the dare, the game might have been over then and there, but the right answers to all his questions might never be found. Mulling over the incident in the moment before he introduced the best part, Derek discovered that, despite himself, he was gaining a profound respect for Kennedy. Not approval, just respect. If found out, the ebony was a robot willing to face the consequences of its actions, but, in a way reminding Derek of human emotions, he preferred to face them sooner than later. Many of you have probably heard of the human pastime of listening to music, and those of you who make or record music, but I trust none of you have ever heard it before, Derek said to the cast and crew. In fact, although I can't ever recall having personally heard music before, I dare say I've never heard it played quite in the way these three comrades play it. So I'd like to introduce you to the three comrades who will provide us with the incidental music of our production. Harry, Benny, and M334, the three cracked cheeks of Robot City. Derek waved the three on as he walked behind Ariel. He whispered in her ear, "This ought to be good." Benny stepped toward the proscenium of the stage as Harry and M334 put on their artificial lips. "Greetings, comrades. We thought we would perform an ancient Terran jingle called 'Tooting Through the Roof.' Hope it stirs your coconut milk." And the three cracked cheeks began to play. At first an AABA riff theme with a solo by Benny on the trumpet, a solo from Harry on the trombone followed. Then M334 on the saxophone took over. In fact, it wasn't long before the solos were alternating thick and fast, with the two backers always offering support with the riff theme. The solos began to give the impression that the three were juggling a ball between them, and whoever had the ball had to depend on the other two for his foundation. Derek hadn't heard the three play since that first audition. The first thing he noticed about this performance was their added confidence in themselves, the almost mathematical precision of their solo trade-offs, and the utter smoothness with which they assailed the tune. He looked down at his foot. It had been tapping. He glanced at Ariel. He had expected her to be bored. Her contempt for all things Terran was, after all, the result of several generations' worth of cultural history. But instead of appearing bored, she looked at the three with rapt attention. Her foot was tapping too. "Now this is Hamlet," said Woolruff. Alright, hope you guys enjoy. Next three chapters are really short. So, yeah. Hope you enjoy these first 6 long chapters in that case. Yeah. I put links to the different songs that our three musicians played down below if you want to listen to them. All right, have a good day.